Hello, this is Gary Marr from Linux Community College. This screen capture is from my SAS 150 AB online class, and in this screen capture I'm going to demonstrate a program which would be discussed in section 3 of our textbook. What I've got here is a file that has two pseudocode blocks, one at the top here without any structures in it, and one we'll go over in a second that does have a pre-test while loop structure or repetition structure. The problem is I want to calculate test scores for my class to get an average. So what I've got here in the top is I've got my start to indicate the beginning of the pseudocode. I declare two variables, initialize them both as 0, which are going to be numbers. I then ask for the student's score. I accumulate that score in a variable called total score. So if the first student's score is 70, it would take 0 plus 70 is 70. If the second student score was 80, it would be 70 plus 80 is 150. And I do this for all 5 students. So I have a total score, a running score, accumulated score. I then divide that by the number of students for average score, and I display this information to the screen. This works fairly well for 5 students, but this program only works for 5 students. If I had a class of 6 or 7 students, or 12 or 15 or 25 or 10,000, I would have to have a different program for each one of those classes. It's not terribly flexible. Also, if it's a big class of, let's say, 30 students, this code gets a little unwieldy, and the fact that it's duplicated code makes it difficult to modify. Because if I have to make one little change, I have to hit every block of code for those 35 students. For 5 students, not so much of a problem, but that's very unusual. Usually it's a lot more than that. The second block I've created is using repetition structures. So here's my start, here's my declaration. I have 2 new variables, one called students and one called count. Everything in this program is using numbers, and probably should have used decimals, so 0.0, but integers fine for illustration purposes. One of the differences with this program is I'm going to ask the person running the program to tell me how many students in the class. This way, this solution can work for a class of 5 students or 35 students. It depends on what that person puts in for the number of students. Here is my repetition structure, or a pre-test structure, which is a while keyword. The Boolean expression is inside the parentheses. And basically what this is saying, as long as count is less than or equal to the number of students, then enter the loop. So count is 1. If I put 5 in for the number of students, 1 is less than or equal to 5, so it enters the loop. The loop steps are the same as what I had before. I'm going to capture the score. I'm going to add it to a running total. I put an additional line in here to display to the screen what the student count was and what the accumulated score was at this point. That's mostly just for the first me developing the software to make sure things are working okay. If this was a solution I was going to give to another teacher, I would probably take that line out of my logic, since it's more of a documentation feature than it is anything that adds to the program. On the bottom here, this line's critical. I've got to take my count and increment it by 1. So what this says is 1 plus 1 now makes count 2. Is 2 less than or equal to 5? It is. It's true. It goes inside the loop again and executes all these statements one more time. If I forget to increment count, count will always stay 1. 1 will always be less than 5, and so this will loop forever, which is called an endless loop or an infinite loop. One of those boo-boos will all make sooner or later, and no big deal. Just if that happens, understand that there's a problem in your Boolean expression. Now, a Boolean expression always evaluates to be true or false. So true, it enters the loop. False, it leaves the loop and goes down to the next processing statement, which is a comment. Then we're going to do our average again, and then finally we're going to display the average to the screen. Now, what I've also done with this particular pseudocode is I've also converted it to Thony, so I can test it. Whenever you start working with structures, loops, if statements, especially nested structures, there's a high probability that you're going to have the wrong symbol, symbol in that logical expression, and maybe you only had less than 5 instead of less than or equal to 5, which means you're going to chop off one value. So running the program and testing it is critical in making sure everything's working okay. Now, if you look at this in Python, you're going to find the indentation has changed. And also number is no longer in the front, excuse me, of these variable names. The way Python works is whatever you assign this value to, that's the data type. If it's a number, it's a number. If it's a float, it's a float. If it's text, it's text. So there's my 4 numbers. Excuse me, there's my prompt for the number of students. This is my while loop. Now the only change in this was I added the colon at the end. Okay, and what Python does, whereas some languages use curly braces to actually identify blocks of code, Python uses indentation. So basically anything that's indented from this after this while loop is part of the loop. It's part of that code block. So it comes down here now and asks me the student score. Okay. Actually, this has some if statements in it too. I forgot about this. This is a little different than the pseudocode version. This has an if statement. This says if the score is greater than 89, okay, then you want to print the student number, what number it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Great job, and then their score. And it's going to do this for 89, and if it's not 89, it's not going to say good job, but that's okay. It's just going to give you my student score. It's next going to take and accumulate the score, add 1 to the counter, okay, until I'm done with my number of students. If there's 5, it's going to stop when it gets to number 6. Come down, average the score, display the score to the screen. So I'm going to run this for you. I'm not going to do a lot. Let's see. Let's do 5. And let's make a score. Let's make it easy to test. Let's say it's 55, 55, 55, 55, 55. And there it is. There's my average of 55. The reason I chose 55 is that this is something which is very easy to do in one's head, and you can see that it proved out to be okay. Hope that helps. There's some examples in the Python of both looping and also an if statement. The pseudocode did not have an if statement. I will put some other if statement examples out there for you if I think is easier to follow than the while loop. If you have any questions, please let me know.